Hello, welcome back to eMarriage, the health podcast for busy, high-performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley, and I would like to wish you a happy new year. This is officially the first episode of 2022. I'm really excited for another year and to just continue podcasting and sharing and doing all the things. And I was thinking about how I wanted to kick this off because last week, I did this three-part series on how to actually set New Year's resolutions that stick. Hopefully you caught that and were able to take some time to just work through that. If you haven't, definitely go back. That's the previous 3 episodes were all geared at that. But what I wanted to share inside of this, so I took last week off, and hopefully many of you did as well. And I know it can be tough to kind of get back into the rigmarole of life and work and kids going back to school and all that stuff. We're currently in Southern California and might be stuck here a while if Seattle doesn't start to cooperate. But all that's neither here nor there. We all have had our experience of whatever the holidays and celebrating the new year and all of that has looked like. And I know for many of you it's also included, I know I tend to go into this really reflective, introspective state as the year comes to an end, and I look at the year before and just kind of what life has led to and brought me, and then something I skipped last year, which I'm going to encourage all of you to do, is looking to the future and to what this coming year, what I want it to look like. And inside of doing that, I've been sharing about, I recommitted to my PhD program. So I actually did quite a bit of studying last week because that's one of the things I do for fun. If anyone is wondering, I'm a nerd, so I love this stuff. So I spent my week between Christmas and New Year's learning about neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change itself, and learning a lot from live lectures and also reading some books by Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you're not familiar with him, brilliant man. Like, I don't get anything from this. I would love to have him come on the show at some point, so I'm just putting that out there in the universe that at some point we are going to have Joe Dispenza on the show to talk about how our brain works, and not even really manifesting, but how we can change our lives by changing our brain. And one of the things that I found so interesting that he shared, and I think is kind of at the crux of why New Year's resolutions suck and fail, and why so many of us get stuck. And I've talked about how we can get stuck on this hamster wheel of always doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Like, it literally is the definition of insanity, right? And so he talks about it's what's cool is a lot of this is now grounded in science. And so I've heard about things like meditation and manifestation, and it sounds cool and whatever, but science hadn't really caught up to explain how that actually works. And now it has. And so I'm actually really excited about this and wanted to just kind of share. I'm going to boil down like the basics. This is one of those classes that I've actually taken the midterm twice now and failed both times, even though I've actually done all the coursework, because it's just doesn't match the content for some reason. Anyways, we get to take it as many times as we need to. We'll just put it that way. But getting back to this, so neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change itself. And what it says is our brain is constantly learning and adapting and, changing. And by the time we hit around age 9, our patterning is pretty ingrained. And so if we're not constantly looking for ways to learn something new or to keep our brain kind of growing and evolving and developing new connections within itself, then it starts to stagnate. And what actually happens is if we are doing everything on repeat, you get up at the same time, you drink the same cup of coffee, you take the same shower, you drive the same route to work, like when you work all day and come home at the same time and eat your dinner at the same time and, watch your favorite TV show and then go to bed and get up and do it all over again. When our lives are on repeat like that, and we're not really getting any extra input or, making any changes in how we're doing things, what actually happens is our brain, there's 3 different parts to our brain that function in this. So our neocortex is where the frontal lobe is, and that's where a lot of our creativity comes from, and that's the thing that we stop using. And so, anything new, that's our intellectual brain and where we're kind of processing and learning stuff. And then underneath that is our limbic system, and that part of the brain is where our emotions live. So our thoughts become feelings. So our neocortex has our thoughts, and then they become feelings, which we feel in our body and is expressed in our body. And then when those 2 things repeat enough in the same pattern, it actually gets ingrained in our cerebellum, which is part of our old brain and more primitive brain. And that's where our just natural responses kind of run in the background, kind of like where this, if we were to talk about where the subconscious lives, like that's a big part of it. So, it's what's regulating our sleeping and our heart beating and our, not really our sleeping, but our breathing, like the things that happen in our body that we don't think about. A lot of that's coming from the cerebellum. And over time, if our thoughts and feelings are, in that pattern long enough, that pattern gets written into the cerebellum. And so it's just running. And what that means is that this is what blew my mind, and I wanted to share. Once we've hit the point where those patterns have been ingrained enough, our cerebellum essentially is running our past as part of our future. Now this is big, and I remember learning about this in my 20s and not fully understanding it. So many of us, we live life and make decisions around experiences, right? And we think that we're carrying around our baggage with us when we do that. Like a lot of, there's imagery of the person like lugging around all the suitcases of bad relationships and whatnot, looking for the next thing. But the reality actually is, and the way that our brain works and how this patterning all happens, is we're not just carrying it around with us. We are putting the past and our past experiences out in our future. And so when you're sitting here and wanting to, change something about your health, or you want to start exercising more, you want to, find your motivation, you want your energy back. These are all things I hear from the women that I work with. And so we try to do the meal planning and try to drink more water and go to the gym more or exercise more. Like, the key word here is try. I want you all to delete this word from your vocabulary, but that's essentially what we're doing, because we're doing all that with this pattern running in the background that isn't changing. And so the plasticity of our brain, plasticity means like moldability and how it changes and all that, isn't receiving any kind of stimulus to let go of those patterns or undo the things that are keeping you stuck. And so we stay stuck and nothing ever changes. And we keep collecting evidence of why nothing ever changes and why life is the way it is. And we can't create anything new. And so there's a couple of things I want you to take from this. Like, number one, maybe asking, okay, well, how do I do this, Dr. Alex? How do I, start to make changes? And because the cool thing is they've found and they've shown through science, like it's not that our brains just stop evolving. And, once we're at a certain, they used to think that once you became an adult, your brain was just like, that was it. And nothing was ever going to change. And, if part of it died, then you were just screwed. They found that that's not true. And so what's cool is we have the ability to start to rewire our brain. And there's this law that's called Hebb's law that, he's one of the kind of key guys in neuroscience and in this neuroplasticity conversation. But he found that basically, and this, we can boil it down to being really simple, but, neurons that fire together wire together. So neurons, when you create a new, channel, when you give your body a new input, new stimulus, new thought, and it comes from thoughts, because that's what our frontal lobe and our neocortex is designed to do. So when we get a new thought and then attach it to that feeling, those neurons start to fire and wire together. And you have to do it enough times, it's repetition, that will turn that into a new pattern that's running in your cerebellum and just, in your life. So this is where like the law of attraction and, manifestation, all of that stuff, and you can call it whatever you want. God, for me, it's God, like, but this is another way that we can kind of connect to whatever that side is for ourselves. When we do that enough times and repeat the new thoughts, so negate the old thought, and I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, and, talked about we have to figure out who our being is. And that's kind of like the being is what's running in the cerebellum and your patterning that you're not really thinking about. It's just kind of like what's running in the background, right? So when we start to rewire things, we change the plasticity of our brain, and we can actually change how things are wired. And they found that when you do this, like, it will change the expression of your genes. It can change, there are people who have healed from cancer, from Joe Dispenza. If you aren't familiar with him, he was in a like horrific accident in a triathlon. He got run over by a car going 55 miles an hour on his bike. The car was going 55 miles an hour, and he broke 6 vertebrae. He's previously, in another life like me, a chiropractor, but they wanted to put rods in his back, and he was never going to walk again, and like all this terrible stuff, right? And he spent 3 months laying face down, visualizing his spine healing basically and growing back together. And it actually did. And so he, today walks and runs and is able to do all the things. And he just was able to get up one day and walk. And, we hear those stories and, people can call it woo woo and bunk and all that stuff. What's cool to me is there's starting to be this, like, we're starting to understand science, because it is science, and all science is theory until it's, proven otherwise, basically. But there's starting to be this understanding of like how our brain works and how things function, and quantum physics, which is essentially the thing that connects us to the rest of the world and is where a lot of possibility lives. And so what's cool about it is you have the ability to change, whether it's your personality or something about your life, some situation. Like, you actually have the ability to make changes there. And it comes from starting to rewire your brain, which starts with your thoughts and then translates into your feelings. And then with enough repetition, gets ingrained into your just general patterning and how things work. And in order to do that, we have to let go of the old patterns. So I think I was starting to talk about how do we actually go about this. And like the main way is, because we're only conscious, only about 5% of our brain is actually our conscious thought. And most of it is running in the subconscious. And so we can't change anything with our conscious thought alone. Like, we have to be able to tap into that other area that's running in the background. The big ways to do that are, things that I've learned about now are like hypnotherapy and biofeedback and some stuff I've talked about on the show, but also meditation. Meditation is a form of self-hypnosis, really. And this is something I've been trying and taking on that I've like never, ever related to. And I know other people who've never related to it, and others who are, think it's amazing and great. And it's not just the act of going into meditation. Like, you have to have a really clear intention around what you're doing with that. Will it help you relax? Absolutely. But you have to, be clear on, like, I am going into this to change and become a different person when I come out of it, kind of thing. And so, I don't get anything from pushing anything about Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has a bunch of meditations on his website. I've been playing around with some of them. Some of them can be long. I'll be honest, it's hard to commit to like an hour-long meditation. So find something that you can start with that's small, but have that, we have to have the intention that we're undoing some of our previous programming and wiring. And that, it comes from our childhood, our upbringing, things we decided, experiences we've had. But we have the ability and the opportunity to change all that. And the other piece of this that I wanted to share is, by the time we're adults, and this is where meditation is one of those ways that we tap into that side of ourselves. If you are creative in any way, you have, like, I play the violin. If you have some sort of artistic expression that you can lose yourself in, that's another way to tap into this side of your brain. Because what happens is, as we get older and experience life and all of that, we have 4 different brain waves. And so our brain kind of gets stuck in running in what's known as beta. And beta is, these are just different waves that exist in nature that they've tracked on with measuring and whatnot. But beta is essentially where fight or flight and stress live, right? And so all of us are living in this beta brain all the time. There is zero creativity. We're just trying to survive. We're trying to get from one day to the next. And I was thinking back and like realized that that's where I was most of last year. Not feeling very creative, feeling kind of stuck. I didn't really have a clear vision or anything for my year, what I wanted to achieve. I was just kind of, in reactionary mode all the time. And the majority of people are living there all the time. And so our job is to figure out how to change the cycling of our brain, which the other states tend to actually be a bit slower, and allow ourselves to find that place of creativity. And so meditation is one of the ways you do that. Hypnotherapy is one of the ways you do that. Tapping into your creative side, whatever that might be, is one of the ways that you do that. Learning something new, all of that. And what we want to do is move in from the beta state into the alpha state. And so alpha is where our creative side lives, alpha, and then theta is right before we go to sleep. Generally, we're in that state, and that's actually a time where a lot of the creative juices can be flowing, and you might be annoyed because you're up all night thinking. Like, we want to still be able to fall asleep, but that's when you might get your best ideas. Like, I used to have a notebook by the bed that I just write things down if I was thinking about stuff, and I've had some of my best ideas then. And so that state is usually right before we fall asleep, and then when we first wake up in the morning. And then delta is where, we're in deep, deep sleep. And so obviously we want to be hitting that as well. But we have to kind of retrain the brain and use it kind of like you would train a muscle or work out or do any of that Otherwise, we lose it. Use it or lose it. That's, I don't know who said that, but essentially that's what neuroscience has shown, is that when you have neurons that fire together, they wire together. And so if you're always just using things in the same way, they never change and they're all wired together, and that just is what is. But if you start to make changes, you can build new, neurons are essentially, synapses is how stuff travels through the brain. But you can build new connections and build new patterns and build new things in that will essentially, rewrite your future, not with your past in it. Really cool stuff. Kind of advanced, maybe a little over people's heads. Hopefully I explained it pretty well. But, the bigger key that I wanted to share and just leave you with is, if you are looking at making some changes this year, and we're in a new year and it's not February yet, so most people are still on this track right now, but you have to look at what patterns are ingrained in you and what things are running the show. Like if you're trying to work out, but it's ingrained in you and you have a pattern of eating ice cream at 10 o'clock at night every night because, it makes you feel loved, or you're lonely, or whatever is driving that, those two things aren't going to work well together, right? And, is the goal of working out that you want to lose weight, or, change something about your body, or you just want to be healthier, any of those things, you have to look at what patterns, healthy and unhealthy, are driving you in the background, and just bring some awareness to them. Because until we make the unconscious conscious, we can't do a whole lot about it. And so a lot of, the things about meditation or self-reflection, or, just really putting yourself in a state where you can ask open-ended questions like, I wonder what it would be like to lose 100 pounds. And then just think about like all the things that could be like. Or I wonder what it'd be like to not be angry and stressed every time I get in my car. And then as you kind of bring this wonder to it, you can start to, you think it, and then you feel it, and then your body starts to create these new patterns and emotion, like tied to your thoughts and feelings. And ultimately, that is what is going to help you be successful. Just one other little tidbit on this that I found super interesting. They've done studies with people, humans, where playing the piano, and they had one group that would, practice and, practice the piece and do all the things, and another group that would just do it in their head with their brain. And what they found was that the people who just practiced in their head had the same level of brain activity and new connections and all of that as if they'd actually physically practiced it. I kind of want to, not that I don't like working out, but, talking about if you really like focus on just mentally visualizing, like working out, bicep curls is one. They found that people will physically have the same response as those who actually go do it, just by doing it in their head, just by visualizing it, because the body doesn't actually know whether you're doing something or not. It's about the neurological connections, and it will start to act and regulate itself like you were doing that. So I found this super interesting. Just, some interesting tidbits to have you think about and consider. So to kind of wrap all this up, our brains are very powerful. I'd argue we still don't understand a whole lot of them, because there's so much more. But, where neuroscience has gotten to is really this place of starting to understand how we can be successful with change or not, and some of the steps that need to go into that. And so I really encourage you, whether you want to read one of Dr. Joe's books or just listen to what I say or any of that, but, finding the places where you can start to build some creativity back into your world will have a bigger impact on you making changes than just trying to add more stuff to your plate. Hopefully that makes sense, because many of us in the high performing world, I know, are, taking on, I'm going to do all this extra stuff on top of what I already have going on. And first, maybe let's look at how we're being in the world and what our thoughts and feelings are driving us to do based on the patterns that are running in the background, and start to bring some of those to light and unwind them and build new ones that are going to serve us in who we really want to be in the future. I hope this serves you. We will be back with our normal interview, which I have a really great one coming up with Dr. Nicole Keene, who we talked a lot about anxiety and depression, and she had a lot of really great stuff to say about that. So come back for that, and we will see you next week.